Welcome to a new home for hyperroll content for as long as Riot allows. And no, Riot had nothing to do with me not being on the other channel anymore, story for another day, but if you like the content, then subscribe, comment, do the things that help the YouTube algorithm. We're dropping the whole mission concept of it and just kind of doing this for fun and to help people get to hyper tier. Everything recorded here is from the PBE for 7.5 Dragonlands Uncharted Realms. This is an interesting patch. It added a few things in and took some things out. So one of my favorite builds, which was the Legend Volibear build, is gone because Legend is gone. But they have introduced a couple of new traits that are pretty OP, and I have watched them nerf these traits over and over again throughout the PBE, and they still haven't gotten them to a place where everyone isn't playing them. But we're going to get into it. We're going to go through the things that seem to be working and get you to hyper as fast as possible once the season drops on September 8th. Now, I want to start with what I find the most fun build of this entire set, not necessarily because it's the most OP, but because I enjoy building it. And that is the Whispers build. And I will do it anytime I get a Zyra, however you want to pronounce her name, or a Silas out of the NPC round, and or an augment that just screams for it. The way Whispers works is kind of simple. When a Whispers champion hits another champion, it will shrink them for 6 seconds, reducing their armor and magic resist by 40%. Plus, the Whispers champions will gain additional attack damage and ability power each time they hit someone impacted by that shrinkage. The amount of AP and AD you get goes up with each level. They have up to 8 levels, but there are only 4 champions, one of which is a dragon, so the most you can get for without crowns and souls and extra emblems is 6, and that's really all you need to pull this off. For augments, I like things like Thrill of the Hunt, but in this case I go with Knife's Edge, and that's simply because you are getting a lot of attack damage in the front line. You'll see how this builds out. It deals with a lot of frontline champions doing most of your damage. And since there are only 4 Whispers champions, which we'll go through in a moment, there's lots of different ways to build the support cast around them, so there is a lot of flexibility with this build. Let's start by going through the Whisper champions and then the items you will need to make this work. You start with Zyra, whatever you want to call her. Again, I've heard all pronunciations. Silas obviously is a must-have. Your dragon is going to be Siphon, and then Pantheon will fill it out. Once you have Pantheon, that will give you the 6 Whisperers. For items, different champions have different requirements. For Siphon, you want a Bloodthirster, Titan's Resolve, and then either a Quicksilver, or sometimes I like to go with a Rage Blade. For the Crazy Plant Lady, I like to put a blue buff and Morellonomicon on her. That will allow her to cast really often and will also put a burn on anything she hits. For Silas, great items are things like Warmogs and Dragon's Claw, since his shield will be bigger, and he will also heal back additional health if he has a Dragon's Claw on him. While sometimes you can put the Dragon's Claw on Siphon, I tend to find it helps better on Silas. I tend not to worry too much about Pantheon, but just put additional AD items I may be able to put together onto him. As you can see with this Treasure Dragon, since it's offering me a Warmogs and I have a Silas, I'm going to take that offering because the chance to put 2 Warmogs on a Silas, well, it's just a little too tempting. So let's talk about synergies a little bit. I like to bring in Evoker by bringing in Seraphine, since that will allow Zyra, Crazy Plant Lady, to cast more often, and the more often she casts, the more she's impacting the other team. After that, there are multiple ways you can go. You can bring in a Rakan to get Mystic onto your team, because that will pair with Seraphine's Mystic. In this particular case, I ended up going to Lagoon, because I could bring in 2 additional Lagoons who would go along with Seraphine, and that way I'm getting gifts throughout the match, and that can help me build later on. Whispers is a pretty easy build to go for because not many people are doing it, so you're likely going to be able to 3-star one of your champions. In this case, it was our crazy plant lady who absolutely shocked the other team by pretty much single-handedly just taking them out. You can see the amount of damage she did and the fact that the other player was just surprised by how we did it. Now in this case, notice I went Mystic instead of Lagoon. It's not necessary to go Lagoon in this build, but it does help to have Seraphine in for that additional Evoker and then Mystic that you can build into with Rakan and Bard. I don't necessarily suggest forcing this, but I do think if you get a Sylas in the NPC round or a Zyra, whatever you want to call her, definitely look to go for it. It is surprising how powerful it is and how well it holds up. I like to often put a Soraka in at the end to help keep everyone up, but as you can see right here, even against a 3-star Lee Sin, Siphon is able to finish it off for the ultimate victory. So for my first build, and this is my favorite one so far, it's going to be Whisperers. Now, before I get into the nonsensically OP build, I want to go over a couple that you can use to reliably get yourself into the top 4. Cannoneer is very, very strong, especially with Graves as your carry. There are lots of different ways to get here because Namzi could possibly be a Cannoneer, so you might be able to pick up 2 Cannoneers directly off of Namzi. The key in this build is going to be Graves, where you're going to want a Bloodthirster, a Titan's Resolve, and then either a Quicksilver or Rageblade, depending on how you feel the game is going. Frontline, I like to pick up the Cavaliers since that will give you a lot of tankiness up front. It will also give you a tiny bit of Dark Flight. This is a new trait for this season that allows a champion to be sacrificed and their item to be distributed to other Dark Flight champions. I haven't found it particularly useful as far as building into it completely, but it does serve a decent purpose in this particular build with the Cannoneers in order to get items from a champion like Sejuani that is just filling out the Cavalier buff but can spread items to Rel and Aphelios. Now, before we get to the nonsense build of the season, let's take one look at another that can reliably get you into the top 4, and that is Jade. It's pretty easy to follow because you're just going to be following the main trait line of Jade. The key, of course, is to pick up Shi-O-Yu. I think I'm pronouncing it right, I'm not sure, but the items for Shi-O-Yu are Bloodthirster, Titan's Resolve, Quicksilver. They may sound familiar. I also like to pick up a Jace, who is a guild and shapeshifter, and that will work well with Gnar, who is also a Jade. You're finishing it out, of course, with Soraka, who's going to heal you and your team. And it will reliably get you into the top 4, but not necessarily win. Now, why will these otherwise solid builds not necessarily win? It's because of this freak of nature build known as Lagoon. Lagoon is new for 7.5. They have nerfed it, at least 5 or 6 times throughout the PBE, and still not nearly enough because you consistently end up with matches that are Lagoon versus Lagoon. Let's talk first a little bit about what Lagoon is and then how to play it. The way it works is pretty simple. You get a little seashell on the side of the screen, and each time one of your Lagoon champions cast, it adds a couple of points to it, and when it reaches different milestones, you get gifts. Those gifts can be anything from an old shoe that gives you nothing to, when you have a high number of Lagoons, golden orbs that can hand out Tactician's Crown or champion duplicators or many, many other things that will render you super, super powerful. Your Lagoon champions are Malphite, Talia, Kai'Sa, Zac, Seraphine, Zeri, Nyla, and the dragon Soam, who is also a mage. With Talia also being a mage, it makes Lagoon Mage a very, very powerful combination to move into if you choose to go that direction. And remember, Lagoons add to the seashell total each time they cast, so if you're using mages, they're casting twice, and also if you go with lots and lots of blue buffs, they're going to be casting a lot, which is going to be giving you lots and lots of extra gifts. Those extra gifts can absolutely make the difference between you winning and losing. In general, my goal is to get a 2-star Sohm with a blue buff, a Hextech Gunblade so I can do some healing for the team, and then some form of amplifier, be it Rabadon's Death Cap, Archangel Staff, or whatever I can do to make the casting more powerful. Going up to 3 mages if you have 9 Lagoon is fine, because the difference in the AP increase for 9 Lagoon will make up for the amount you lose on the 3 mages. But the real gem in the Lagoon buff is Nyla. When you get her strong, you can put just about any damage amplifying items on her and she will go to town. Look at this match as it ends and you can see she is doing almost all the damage on the entire team, even though it is set for mage. And I don't know how many more nerfs are incoming on this, but every time I was finding a build that I thought was solid, and here's one with a gold 3-star Graves. Didn't matter. The Lagoon team with the 3-star Nyla is just able to annihilate me, putting me into 2nd place. And this happens over and over again with builds that I try. And it's not just a 3-star Graves that fell to the Lagoon Menace. Here I have a 3-star Jade Shi-OU, and I thought for sure I had this one locked down. But as you can see, Lagoon is really, really strong and can knock you out when you least expect it. Lagoon is pretty easy to force because it's easy to get 3 Lagoon out of the start, and then it is highly versatile as you go forward. As you can see here, I'm running 7 Lagoon, 5 Mage, and I've even managed to bring in Whisperer with a 3-star Zyra Plant Lady person. And that's going to be enough to take me through. The gifts that you get once you've hit 6 Lagoon can be golden orbs, and if you have a 2-star Sohm with a lot of healing and a blue buff, you're going to be keeping your team alive. Ultimately, this is the build to look out for, but it is also highly competitive, so you could be in a position where you go out 8th simply because you don't end up getting what you need at the time. But for this PBE, I ended up deciding to just run Lagoon all the way to the end and try to force it for several games in a row to see where it ended up leading me. And that is, as you can tell by the loading screen, what finally put me into Hyper in the PBE. I hope this helps you going forward. I'll be doing more specific builds on Lagoon and Whispers. Hope you enjoyed this video. All future videos will be on this channel. Have an absolutely, absolutely awesome day.